She woke up early, as she did every morning, before the sun had fully risen. The alarm clock blared in the quiet apartment, and she reached out a hand to shut it off. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the familiar heaviness in her body. Another day, another shift at the small cafe in town. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, staring at the worn floorboards beneath her feet. Her apartment was modest, just enough space for a bed, a small kitchen, and a corner where her old keyboard sat, collecting dust from neglect. It was her secret corner, the place where her dreams had not yet been buried by the weight of reality. She dressed quickly in her simple uniform, a plain shirt and dark trousers, the same ones she wore every day. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance, she thought. She was just another person in the city, unnoticed, blending into the background. She grabbed a granola bar and a bottle of water, taking a quick, silent breakfast before leaving her apartment. Outside, the air was cool and the streets were slowly waking up. People hurried past her, absorbed in their own worlds, and she moved among them like a shadow, quiet and unassuming. The cafe was already starting to stir as she arrived. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air, a mixture that was comforting and exhausting at the same time. She hung her coat in the staff area and tied on her apron. The morning rush would come soon, and she had to be ready. Her coworkers greeted her casually, not noticing her presence more than a passing nod or a brief good morning. She moved behind the counter, pouring coffee, arranging croissants, and setting tables. Her hands worked almost automatically, a rhythm she had perfected over months and months of long shifts. Customers arrived in waves, some regulars, some new faces, absorbed in their own conversations or thoughts. She served them with a polite smile, taking orders, carrying trays, and clearing tables. She was efficient, attentive, and patient, but it never drew attention. People thanked her mechanically, barely looking at her as they sat down. She overheard bits of their conversations, laughter, and arguments, feeling like a spectator in her own life. She remembered how she used to dream about being a musician, about filling concert halls with her music. But those dreams seemed distant now, overshadowed by bills, responsibilities, and the constant need to survive. She kept that part of herself hidden, tucked away behind the apron and the routine. During a brief lull, she stepped behind the counter and leaned against it, taking a moment to catch her breath. She wiped the sweat from her brow and looked around the cafe. The walls were decorated with local artwork, some of it bright and cheerful, some of it fading with age. The tables were polished, the chairs neatly arranged, and the smell of coffee lingered in the air. She felt a small pang of longing, a reminder that life could be more than this, that she could be more than just a waitress. She pushed the thought away and focused on the next task, cleaning up a spill near the entrance. The routine was familiar, comforting in a strange way, but it was also a cage. Holding her back from the life she wanted, she moved to the corner of the cafe where the old piano sat. It was an upright piano, dusty and slightly out of tune, mostly ignored by everyone who walked through the door. Some of her coworkers joked about it, saying it was useless, that no one cared about music anymore. But she felt a strange pull toward it, a connection she could not explain. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the cool wood beneath her touch. It had been years since she had played in front of anyone. The sound that emerged was soft and hesitant, like a whisper from the past. Her heart stirred at the familiar feeling, the memories of lessons, recitals, and dreams that had once seemed so important. She quickly withdrew her hands, afraid someone might notice, and went back to the counter. A regular customer walked in, and she greeted them with a practiced smile. She took their order, prepared their coffee, and set it on the table with a polite nod. Life went on, uninterrupted, and she remained in her quiet corner, a presence without recognition. She wondered if anyone ever saw her for who she truly was, if anyone knew about the music that lived inside her. It was a thought she pushed aside, burying it under the routine of service and survival. The morning continued with its familiar rhythm. Orders came and went, tables were cleared, and the espresso machine hissed and steamed. She moved among the customers, carrying trays and refilling cups. Always alert, always attentive, but never noticed beyond her efficiency. Her coworkers chatted and laughed among themselves, sharing stories and jokes. But she remained on the periphery, listening quietly, participating only when necessary. She was invisible in a way that both protected and isolated her, a shield that kept her dreams safe, but also kept her from sharing them with the world. During a short break, she retreated to the small corner of the cafe that was less visible. She pulled out a notebook from her bag, scribbling a few notes, ideas for songs that had been forming in her mind. The melodies were incomplete, fragments of what could be, but they were hers. She hummed softly to herself, the sound barely audible over the hum of the cafe. It was a private ritual, a reminder that she still had a voice, even if no one else could hear it. The piano in the corner seemed to call to her, a silent invitation, and she longed to sit at it again, to let her fingers dance over the keys and bring the music to life. But the break ended too soon. She returned to the floor, serving customers, carrying plates, and managing orders with practiced efficiency. The cafe was busy now, the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation filling the air. She moved swiftly, anticipating needs before they were spoken, a quiet force keeping the cafe running smoothly. And all the while, the piano sat in the corner, untouched, waiting for someone to notice it, waiting for her to remember what she was capable of. As the morning rush tapered off, she finally had a moment to breathe. She leaned against the counter, glancing at the piano again. The idea of sitting there, even for a few minutes, filled her with both excitement and fear. She remembered the times she had performed as a child, the applause that had seemed so far away now, and the sense of freedom she had felt when the music flowed through her. Those memories were bittersweet, a reminder of both joy and loss. She wondered if she had the courage to try again, to let the music speak even if no one was listening. The cafe settled into a quieter rhythm, with only a few lingering customers. She moved to refill coffee cups, wipe down tables, and tidy up the space. But her mind was elsewhere, on the piano and the music that had not yet been shared. She felt a growing determination, a quiet resolve that perhaps it was time to stop hiding, even if it was just for a moment. She imagined herself sitting at the keys, the sound filling the room, and felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that reminded her of who she was beneath the uniform and the routine. As the day went on, she continued her work with care, attentive to every detail. Yet the thought of the piano lingered in her mind. She noticed the way the sunlight hit the keys in the afternoon, how the shadows played across the worn wood, and felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. She promised herself that one day she would sit there and play, that the music would not remain hidden forever. For now, she moved through the motions of her day, serving customers, cleaning tables, and keeping the cafe running, but inside. A quiet revolution was stirring, a readiness to reclaim a part of herself that had been waiting patiently for the right moment to emerge. The next morning, she woke up to the same routine. The city was slowly coming to life outside her window, with cars passing and people hurrying to work. She moved through her apartment quietly, not wanting to wake anyone else, though she lived alone. Breakfast was simple, just a piece of toast and some tea. Her mind wandered, as it often did, to the old piano in the cafe. She could not stop thinking about it. Its presence had stirred something in her, a memory of who she had been and who she could still become. As she walked to work, she thought about the piano constantly. She imagined herself sitting there, playing the first notes, feeling the keys under her fingers. She remembered the lessons she had as a child, the sound of her teacher's voice guiding her hands, the feeling of accomplishment when she mastered a difficult piece. That feeling had never truly left her. It had only been pushed aside, buried under years of routine and responsibility. Arriving at the cafe, she greeted her coworkers with a quiet nod and slipped into her apron. The morning rush had not yet begun, and the cafe was calm. She moved behind the counter, cleaning and preparing, but her eyes kept returning to the piano. It seemed to call to her, inviting her to sit and play. She felt a mix of fear and excitement. What if she tried and it sounded awful? What if someone laughed? But more than that, there was a small voice inside her that said it was time to try, that it was time to remember herself. She kept busy with the early customers, taking orders, serving coffee, and clearing tables. The regulars arrived, greeted her casually, continued with their conversations, unaware of the storm of thoughts inside her. She moved efficiently, keeping a smile on her face, but her heart was elsewhere. During a quiet moment, she glanced at the piano and made a decision. She would play, if only for herself. The thought terrified her, but the excitement was stronger. Later, when the cafe had a small lull, she stepped toward the piano. Dust covered the keys, and it was slightly out of tune, but that did not matter. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the coolness beneath her fingers. She played a simple melody, hesitant at first, her fingers finding their way slowly. The notes were soft and imperfect, but they carried a life that had been missing from her day. It felt as if she was reconnecting with a part of herself that had been asleep for too long. A coworker happened to walk by and stopped in surprise. They had never heard her play before, and the sound took them off guard. They leaned against the counter quietly, listening. When the piece ended, she looked up, startled. The coworker smiled and whispered, "You can play?" "I had no idea," she nodded, unsure what to say. She had never performed in front of anyone in the cafe before. She had always kept her music private, hidden behind closed doors in private lessons long ago. Word spread slowly among the staff. People began to notice her, the quiet waitress who had a hidden talent. They asked her to play occasionally, teasing and laughing, but she remained cautious. She did not want attention. She just wanted to play. Still, she felt a small spark of pride, a recognition of her own abilities. It was a reminder that she was more than her uniform, more than the routine of waiting tables and cleaning dishes. Days passed, and she continued her quiet life at the cafe. But she began to take small moments to sit at the piano, playing softly when no one was around. The music became a private ritual, a source of comfort and joy. It reminded her that she had a voice, a gift that had not disappeared, despite years of neglect. She began to feel a sense of possibility, a sense that life could be more than the small, predictable routine she had known for so long. Customers noticed the piano too. Some watched her play with curiosity, some with admiration. A few even asked if she would play again. Each time she agreed, her heart raced, but she felt alive in a way that she had not felt in years. The cafe, once just a place of work, became a place of expression. She began to see herself not just as a waitress, but as someone who could share her music with others, even in small ways. One evening, after closing, she stayed behind, playing a longer piece. The cafe was empty, the chairs stacked on tables, and the lights dimmed. She let the music flow freely, letting her emotions guide her hands. Memories of childhood lessons, moments of joy, and quiet moments of sorrow all came through the notes. It was a release, a conversation with herself, a way to remember who she was and who she could become. Her coworkers occasionally peeked in, watching quietly. They were surprised at the depth of her talent, the emotion in her playing. Some whispered to each other, sharing their amazement, but she paid little attention. She was lost in the music, in the way it made her feel alive and recognized, even if only by herself. The piano had become a bridge between her hidden dreams and the life she lived, a connection to something larger than routine and survival. Over the weeks, she grew more confident. She experimented with different melodies, creating small improvisations and variations on pieces she remembered from childhood. She discovered that playing in front of others, even her coworkers, no longer felt frightening. Instead, it felt natural, a way to express what words could not capture. The cafe, once just a place of labor, became a stage. Even if the audience was small and informal, the piano itself seemed to respond to her. Each note felt alive, each melody flowing from her heart. She realized that the instrument had been waiting for her, that it had a story of its own to tell through her hands. She felt a growing sense of responsibility to nurture this connection, to play not only for herself, but for anyone who might listen. The thought of sharing her music beyond the cafe began to take root, a small seed of ambition that promised new possibilities. Despite the progress, she remained humble and cautious. She did not want to appear boastful or seek attention. The joy of music was enough for her, and the small moments of recognition from coworkers were a welcome encouragement. She felt a quiet pride in her skill, a validation of her years of dedication and practice. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a witness to her hidden self, and a symbol of potential waiting to be realized. One day, a regular customer, who often came in the afternoons, asked if she could play a piece. She hesitated, feeling the familiar nervousness, but nodded. As she played, the room seemed to transform. The sound of the piano filled the space, capturing the attention of everyone present. Conversations paused, and people listened. The music carried emotion, depth, and sincerity, creating a shared experience that was unexpected and powerful. She felt a thrill, a connection, realizing that her music could touch others in ways she had never imagined. After that day, more people began to notice. The cafe owner mentioned how the music seemed to improve the atmosphere, drawing in more customers and creating a warm, inviting environment. Her role as a waitress was no longer separate from her music. They began to blend. She served tables with the same care and attention, but now there was an added dimension to her presence. She was no longer just a background figure. She was a source of beauty and inspiration, even in small, quiet ways. She continued to practice daily, both on the piano at the cafe and on her old keyboard at home. The music became a thread weaving through her life, connecting her past, present, and future. Each note played was a reminder that she had something unique to offer, that her dreams were not forgotten, and that her life could change in unexpected ways. She began to see herself not just as a waitress, but as someone with potential, talent, and the ability to make a difference through her art. The piano, once neglected and overlooked, had awakened something inside her. It had reminded her that even in the most ordinary circumstances, extraordinary things could happen. She learned that talent and passion could be hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge, and she felt ready, even if uncertain, to embrace whatever opportunities might come. Knowing that the music within her was a gift worth sharing, the morning started like any other. She woke up to the soft light coming through the curtains, the city beginning to stir outside her window. Her routine was familiar, a quick breakfast, tying back her hair, and putting on the uniform that had become part of her identity. Yet today felt different. There was a flutter of anticipation in her chest, an unfamiliar excitement mixed with nervousness. The piano in the cafe had been calling her for days, urging her to do more than just practice when no one was watching. Today she felt ready to let the music reach other ears, to share it in a way she had never dared before. Arriving at the cafe, she greeted her coworkers with a quiet nod and slipped behind the counter. The early morning rush had just begun, and the smell of coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of fresh pastries. She moved efficiently, serving tables and taking orders, but her mind kept drifting to the piano. Each time she passed it, she felt a pull she could not ignore. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, imagining how she would sit at the keys, how the music would flow, and how people might react. Her hands trembled slightly at the thought, but the anticipation was stronger than the fear. The cafe grew busier as the morning unfolded. The chatter of customers, the clinking of cups, and the hum of the espresso machine created a backdrop of ordinary life. She moved among the tables with practiced efficiency, taking orders, clearing dishes, and keeping the atmosphere smooth and welcoming. Customers smiled and thanked her, barely noticing the small whirlwind of emotions inside her. She was aware of every glance, every nod, but she remained focused, keeping her secret excitement tucked beneath the apron. Finally, a lull came, a rare moment when the cafe quieted for a few minutes. She glanced at the piano, feeling the pull stronger than ever. Her heart raced, but she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. With a deep breath, she moved toward the instrument. Her hands hovered over the keys, feeling the familiar texture, the coolness beneath her fingertips. She pressed the first note, and the sound rang out in the quiet room. It was soft, hesitant, and imperfect, but it was hers. The music began to flow, simple at first, then growing in confidence and emotion. She let the melodies take her fingers dancing over the keys as if recalling a memory that had been waiting to be awakened. A few customers looked up, their conversations fading as they listened. The soft murmur of the cafe was replaced by the delicate notes of her playing. Some faces showed surprise, others curiosity, and a few smiles of recognition. The music carried an honesty that was impossible to ignore, and slowly, more people turned their attention toward her. She felt her nerves settle as she lost herself in the flow of sound. Each note, each chord, was an expression of everything she had kept hidden, a voice that had been silent for too long. Her coworkers watched from behind the counter, their eyes wide with astonishment. They had known she could play, but hearing her perform in the cafe, in front of real customers, was something entirely different. They whispered to each other, sharing their amazement quietly, careful not to interrupt the magic unfolding. The cafe owner, passing by, paused mid-step, listening to the unexpected music that filled the room. Even he, who had seen many things in his establishment, was caught off guard by the raw talent emanating from the piano. As she continued, the atmosphere in the cafe transformed. The chatter faded entirely, replaced by an attentive silence. Phones were put down, eyes focused, and a sense of shared experience filled the room. Strangers were drawn together by the music, and the ordinary cafe became a place of connection, even if only for a few moments. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of joy and relief. Realizing that she was not invisible, that her music could reach others and make a difference, the piece came to an end. And for a heartbeat, there was complete silence. Then, slowly, the room erupted into quiet applause and murmurs of appreciation. She smiled shyly, unsure how to respond, but the feeling of recognition washed over her. People approached her, complimenting her playing, expressing their surprise and admiration. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not for her work behind the counter, but for the talent she had kept hidden. It was a powerful, validating moment that she would never forget. The rest of the day felt lighter, more vibrant. She continued her work at the cafe, but the knowledge of what she had shared lingered. Customers returned, some specifically asking for her to play, others simply drawn by the energy and beauty of the previous performance. She felt a growing sense of confidence, realizing that her music could create moments of joy and connection in a world that often felt disconnected. The piano had become a bridge, linking her inner self with the lives of others. And it was a bridge she was eager to explore. As evening approached, she stayed behind after closing to play again. The cafe was empty, the lights dimmed, and the silence provided a perfect canvas for her music. She let herself be carried away, improvising, exploring melodies that she had only imagined before. The sound filled the room, echoing softly, and for a moment, she felt a sense of completeness, a merging of past, present, and future. This was what she had been missing, what she had longed for without realizing it. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a partner in the unfolding story of her life. Her coworkers occasionally peeked in, drawn by the music, but she barely noticed them. She was lost in the flow, her fingers moving with a confidence that surprised even her. Each note carried emotion, depth, and honesty. The music spoke for her when words could not, expressing hopes, fears, and dreams that had been locked away for too long. The feeling of connection, even in solitude, was profound, and she knew that sharing it with others would only deepen that experience. In the following days, the cafe became a small stage for her talent. Regular customers began to look forward to her performances, and new faces arrived, curious about the young woman who could transform a simple cafe into a place of beauty and emotion. She played with increasing confidence, experimenting with different styles, blending familiar melodies with her own improvisations. The music became an essential part of the cafe experience, and she began to feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment she had never known. The piano, once neglected and overlooked, had awakened something in her and in those around her. People began to speak of her talent, sharing stories and compliments, creating a sense of community around the music. She felt proud, not in a boastful way, but in a quiet acknowledgement of her abilities and the joy she could bring. She had discovered a power within herself that she had long forgotten. and it was exhilarating. Yet, despite the attention, she remained humble. The joy of playing, of expressing herself and connecting with others, was enough. She did not seek fame or recognition. She simply wanted to play, to let the music speak, and to see where it could lead. Each performance, each note, was a step forward. A small victory in reclaiming the part of herself that had been hidden for so long. Her life was still rooted in the routine of the cafe. In the early mornings, the orders, and the long shifts, but the music had changed everything. It had given her purpose, confidence, and a sense of identity beyond the apron and the counter. She realized that one brave step sitting at the piano in front of others could open doors she had never imagined. The cafe was no longer just a place of work. It was a space for expression, discovery, and connection. And she was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a storyteller, a witness to the beauty that could emerge from the ordinary. The days after her first public performance at the cafe were filled with a new energy she had never felt before. She woke up each morning with a sense of anticipation, not just for the routine work ahead, but for the possibility of what could happen with the music she now shared openly. The piano had become more than a corner fixture. It was the heart of the cafe, a source of life that drew people in and reminded them of the beauty that could exist in ordinary moments. Word of her talent began to spread beyond the regular customers and the walls of the cafe. One day, a local blogger stopped in, having heard about the young waitress who could play piano with emotion and skill. They asked to record a short video of her playing. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she wanted strangers to see her, but after a moment of thought, she agreed. Sitting at the piano, she played with the same honesty and sincerity she always did, letting the music guide her fingers. The video captured something special: the raw talent, the humility, and the joy that radiated from her performance. The video was posted online and quickly gained attention. Comments poured in, praising her skill and expressing surprise that such talent had been hidden in a quiet cafe. Strangers were moved by the authenticity of her playing. Some shared the video with friends, others wrote messages encouraging her to perform more and to consider a professional path. She was overwhelmed by the response, feeling both pride and disbelief. She had never imagined that her music could reach so many people, that it could touch lives beyond the cafe. The cafe itself began to change. More customers arrived, curious to hear her play in person. The atmosphere became lively and warm, filled with anticipation whenever she sat at the piano. She noticed people smiling more, talking less, and listening more attentively. The cafe owner expressed his appreciation, saying that the music had brought new life to the space and that people were coming not just for the coffee, but for the experience she created. She felt a sense of validation, a quiet joy that came from knowing she had made a difference. Even in a small way, despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. She continued her work behind the counter, serving tables and cleaning with the same care as before. But now, her presence had another dimension. People were beginning to notice her not just as a waitress, but as a musician, someone capable of bringing beauty into their lives through sound. She felt a growing confidence, realizing that her talent was not something to hide, but something to share and embrace. Local musicians and music teachers began to reach out, offering guidance, collaboration, and even invitations to perform at small events. She listened carefully, considering each opportunity with a mix of excitement and caution. The idea of performing outside the cafe was both thrilling and terrifying. She'd always been private, keeping her music to herself. But the thought of sharing it with a larger audience sparked a new determination. She began to see the possibilities that had once seemed distant and unattainable. Her evenings were often spent at the piano after closing time, practicing new pieces, experimenting with improvisation, and exploring the depth of her abilities. She discovered a freedom in creating her own music, in expressing emotions that words could not convey. The piano had become a companion, a confidant, and a mentor of sorts. Each session deepened her connection to the instrument and to herself, reinforcing the sense that this was not just a hobby, but a vital part of her identity. One afternoon, a local radio station contacted the cafe, asking to feature her story and play live on air. The staff were excited, and she felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. She had never performed for such an audience before, but the support from her coworkers and the encouragement from regular customers gave her courage. On the day of the broadcast, she sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The familiar melodies filled the airwaves, and she felt the same flow of emotion that she experienced in the cafe, amplified by the knowledge that many listeners were hearing her for the first time. The broadcast was a success. Calls and messages came in, praising her music and expressing awe at her skill. She received offers for small performances at local venues, invitations to collaborate with other musicians, and even requests for lessons from people who wanted to learn from her. The reality of her talent reaching a wider audience was beginning to sink in, and with it came a sense of purpose she had never known. Her life was shifting, slowly but surely, from the routine of waiting tables to the possibility of pursuing her passion. Yet she remained humble and reflective. She understood that her journey was just beginning, that there were challenges and uncertainties ahead. But the piano had opened a door, one that had been closed for too long, and she was determined to step through it. She continued to work at the cafe, valuing the stability it provided, but she no longer saw it as the limit of her life. Instead, it became a space where she could nurture her music, connect with people, and build confidence in her abilities. The community around her began to change as well. People were inspired by her story, seeing how talent and dedication could emerge from unexpected places. She became a symbol of hope and perseverance, not because she sought recognition, but because her actions demonstrated what was possible when one dared to embrace their gifts. The cafe, once a simple workplace, had become a gathering place for music, conversation, and shared experiences. Her presence was central to that transformation, a reminder that one person could create ripples of beauty and change in the lives of many. As weeks turned into months, she began to take on new challenges. She experimented with more complex pieces, practiced techniques she had never mastered before, and even started composing short, original melodies. Each day brought growth. Each performance reinforced her confidence. Each interaction with listeners reminded her of the impact her music could have. The piano was no longer a hidden corner of the cafe. It was a bridge to the world, a way to express herself and connect with others on a deep and meaningful level. Her life was no longer defined solely by her job as a waitress. While she continued to work diligently, she embraced the identity of a musician, someone capable of transforming ordinary moments into something extraordinary. She realized that talent, passion, and perseverance could open doors that had once seemed impossible. The recognition she received was not the goal. The joy of creating and sharing music was the reward. And with each passing day, she felt more ready to explore the future, knowing that the piano would guide her through the next chapters of her journey. Months passed, and her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The cafe had become more than just a workplace. It was a place where music and community intertwined, where strangers became friends through the shared experience of her playing. She continued to work diligently as a waitress, but now her presence carried a new sense of purpose, a recognition that she was more than just someone serving tables. The piano had given her a voice, and that voice was being heard. One morning, she received a call from a local arts organization. They had heard her story and were interested in featuring her in a small recital at a community event. Her heart raced with excitement and nervousness. She had never imagined performing outside the cafe, but the thought of sharing her music with a larger audience filled her with anticipation. She spent the days leading up to the event, practicing tirelessly, exploring new pieces, perfecting old favorites, and adding personal touches that made the music uniquely hers. The day of the recital arrived, and she felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. She arrived at the venue early, setting her bag down and taking in the space. It was larger than the cafe, with rows of seats and a stage that seemed daunting. Backstage, she saw other performers preparing, each focused and confident in their own way. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had already touched people with her music, and this was simply a new opportunity to do the same. When it was her turn to perform, she walked to the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys. The audience was silent, waiting. She took a moment, feeling the energy in the room, and then began to play. The music flowed naturally, carrying her emotions, her story, and the journey she had taken over the past months. The notes filled the space, resonating with honesty and vulnerability. She felt herself completely absorbed, losing awareness of the audience and the stage, existing only in the music. As she played, she noticed faces in the crowd soften. Eyes closing in concentration, small smiles appearing. She realized that the music was connecting people in the same way it had in the cafe, but on a larger scale. It was a shared experience, a moment of beauty in the midst of everyday life. When the final note lingered in the air, the room erupted into applause. She felt a surge of joy, a validation not of ego, but of the power of art to touch hearts. After the recital, people approached her, offering compliments, sharing how moved they had been, and asking questions about her journey. She spoke humbly, recounting how she had started playing quietly in the cafe, never expecting anyone to notice. Her story resonated with many, inspiring them to reflect on their own hidden talents and unfulfilled dreams. She realized that her music had not only changed her life, but had begun to ripple outward, encouraging others to embrace their passions. Over the following weeks, she received invitations to perform at small community gatherings, local schools, and private events. Each performance was a chance to connect, to share her music, and to grow more confident. She began to see herself not just as a waitress who played piano, but as a musician with a story, a journey, and a gift to offer. The fear that had once held her back gradually faded, placed by a sense of purpose and excitement for what lay ahead. Despite the growing recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to work at the cafe, valuing the stability it provided and the community it nurtured. But now, each day carried an added layer of meaning. The routine of serving coffee and clearing tables was intertwined with the music that flowed through the space, creating a balance between responsibility and passion. She learned that one did not need to abandon one life for another. Rather, it was possible to weave them together in harmony. Her family and friends began to notice the transformation as well. They saw her confidence grow, her spirit light up, and her joy radiate in a way that had been missing before. They asked about her performances, encouraged her to continue, and celebrated each small victory. The support of those who loved her reinforced the importance of pursuing her dreams while staying connected to her roots. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, she sat at the piano alone, reflecting on how far she had come. The keys felt familiar under her fingers, yet every note she played carried new depth and meaning. She realized that the journey had not been about fame or recognition, but about reclaiming a part of herself that had been hidden. The music was a mirror, showing her strength, courage, and resilience. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the piano, the cafe, and the people who had witnessed and encouraged her along the way. The piano had become a symbol of transformation. It reminded her that life could change in unexpected ways, that hidden talents and passions could emerge when given a chance. She understood that the moments of courage the first note played in the cafe, the willingness to share her music had opened doors she never thought possible. Each step forward had built upon the last, creating a chain of experiences that led her to a life more vibrant and fulfilling than she had imagined. As her story continued to unfold, she embraced the new opportunities with humility and excitement. She performed not for accolades, but for the joy of expression and the connections it created. Her music became a gift, a way to inspire others, and a reminder that one person's courage could touch many lives. She remained a waitress, but she was no longer defined by that role alone. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a symbol of perseverance and hope. In the quiet moments, when the cafe was empty and the lights dimmed, she would sit at the piano, letting her fingers wander over the keys. She played for herself, for the memories of where she had been, and for the possibilities of the future. Each note was a celebration of her journey, a testament to the power of passion, and a reminder that one brave step could change everything. The music was no longer hidden. It was alive, vibrant, and part of the world she had begun to touch. And in that music, she found herself fully, completely, and finally.